Dr. Eloise Pendergast stared at her breakfast toast, which had, quite unexpectedly, begun to glow with an iridescent light before words materialized across its surface in what appeared to be strawberry jam. You are cordially invited to the 4827th Annual Interdimensional Caretakers Potluck. BYOD, bring your own dimension-compatible dish. Formal attire optional, existence mandatory. Eloise sighed deeply, placing her mug of perfectly brewed coffee on the counter. Ever since accidentally purchasing the universe from that peculiar shop, the Chronoflux Emporium, her life had taken a decidedly strange turn. First, it was the quantum hiccups in the Messier 87 galaxy that she'd somehow resolved. Then the bizarre consciousness outbreak that had her household appliances discussing existentialism. Now this. I don't have time for a potluck, she muttered. I have a universe to return. Her toaster, which had recently developed a rather snooty personality during the consciousness contagion, chose that moment to speak up. Actually, Doctor, attendance is considered mandatory for all cosmic system administrators. Section 7, Paragraph 9 of the Universal Maintenance Agreement you inadvertently signed. I never signed, Eloise began, before remembering that peculiar receipt that had appeared in her pocket after leaving the Emporium. Oh, fantastic! She picked up the glowing toast, turned it over, and found additional information on the reverse side. Transportation will materialize at precisely 7:38 p.m. Attire should respect the gravitational constants of your origin system. Special accommodations available for non-corporeal, multidimensional, and quantum superpositioned attendees. This could be an opportunity, came a voice from everywhere and nowhere at once. Eloise didn't flinch anymore when Paradox appeared, or rather, when Paradox decided to make their presence known, as they likely had been there all along and simultaneously not there at all. Today, they presented as an elderly figure whose skin occasionally rippled with mathematical equations, silver hair flowing like liquid mercury. What kind of opportunity? Eloise asked, taking another sip of her coffee. To find a more qualified owner, Paradox said, a knowing glint in their eyes that momentarily displayed the Schrödinger equation instead of irises. The potluck is attended by beings responsible for maintaining various cosmic systems. Surely one of them would be better suited to care for an entire universe than a human physicist who never wanted the job. Eloise perked up immediately. You think someone might take it off my hands? It's possible, Paradox replied, their form briefly flickering between their elderly appearance and what looked like a child made of blue light before stabilizing again. Though cosmic responsibility isn't typically something one can simply hand off like a casserole. Before Eloise could respond, crystalline fragments began coalescing in her living room, forming the humanoid shape of Mneem. The quantum memory construct surface rippled with images, a distant supernova, children playing in a park, the signing of some unknown treaty, before settling into their standard appearance of swirling data patterns. I have information about the potluck, Mneem announced, their voice echoing slightly as if coming from multiple points in time simultaneously. I have accessed memories from 17 previous gatherings. They are quite chaotic. 3 have ended in dimensional collapses. 1 resulted in the accidental creation of a pocket universe inhabited entirely by sentient appetizers. That's not encouraging, Eloise frowned. The appetizers developed space travel within 3 centuries, Mneem added helpfully. Eloise pinched the bridge of her nose. What am I supposed to bring to an interdimensional potluck anyway? Something that represents your universe, Paradox suggested. I was thinking of bringing memories, Mneem said brightly. I have a lovely collection of first kisses from across 12 galaxies. Paradox scoffed, their form briefly destabilizing into overlapping transparent versions of themselves. Memories aren't food. You can't serve memories at a potluck. Actually, Mneem countered, in Universe C-291, memories are consumed as the primary form of sustenance. They pair particularly well with quantum uncertainty. As her companions began debating the culinary merits of metaphysical concepts, Eloise turned her attention back to the toast invitation. Something about this potluck might indeed be her ticket out of universe ownership. She just needed to prepare properly. At precisely 7:38 p.m., Eloise stood in her living room wearing her best business casual attire, a casserole dish containing what she decided was the most universally appealing dish, macaroni and cheese. It was simple, comforting, and importantly, contained no paradoxes or metaphysical implications that might upset delicate interdimensional digestive systems. Beside her stood Paradox, who had opted for an appearance that vaguely resembled formal wear, if formal wear occasionally phased through 11 dimensions. Neem had somehow fashioned themselves a bow tie made of crystallized memories, which occasionally projected snippets of formal occasions from across time and space. "Are you certain this will be acceptable?" Eloise asked, looking down at her casserole. "It seems a bit mundane for an interdimensional gathering." "That's precisely why it will be appreciated," Paradox assured her. "Most cosmic caretakers try far too hard with their dishes." Last Potluck, the guardian of the Cygnus quantum probability field brought a dish that existed in all possible states simultaneously. It gave everyone quantum indigestion for an epoch. Before Eloise could ask what quantum indigestion entailed, the air in front of them began to fold in on itself, creating what appeared to be a doorway outlined in shimmering mathematical constants. "Our ride has arrived," Paradox announced. Eloise took a deep breath and stepped through. The sensation was not unlike being turned inside out, run through a mathematical proof, and then reassembled with slightly different spacing between her atoms. It lasted only a moment, and then Eloise found herself standing in what appeared to be an enormous ballroom that couldn't possibly exist in conventional space. The ceiling, if it could be called that, seemed to be composed of various astronomical phenomena. Galaxies swirled overhead, neutron stars pulsed in rhythmic patterns, and what appeared to be the birth of a solar system was occurring in the far corner. The walls shifted constantly, sometimes appearing solid, sometimes revealing glimpses into other dimensions or time periods. Most strikingly, the room was filled with the most diverse collection of beings Eloise had ever encountered. Some appeared humanoid, others were clearly not. There were beings composed of pure light, geometric shapes engaged in conversation, creatures that seemed to be constantly shifting between states of matter, and several entities that Eloise's brain simply refused to process, leaving blank spots in her vision that nonetheless somehow carried cocktail glasses. "Welcome to the 4827th Annual Interdimensional Caretakers Potluck," announced a being composed entirely of what appeared to be animated mathematical equations. "Please place your offerings on the central table and ensure they are properly labeled with interdimensional hazard warnings toward an impossibly long table already laden with dishes that defied description." One appeared to be a salad composed of different types of time. Another was a bubbling cauldron of something that seemed to be simultaneously liquid, solid, and a concept rather than a physical substance. "Just set it down anywhere," Paradox advised. "And I suggest we eat soon. These events have a tendency to destabilize as the evening progresses." "Destabilize?" Eloise asked, carefully placing her mac and cheese between something that was emitting quantum harmonics and a dish that appeared to be a black hole garnished with parsley. "Interdimensional gatherings require careful calibration," Neem explained, their surface momentarily displaying scenes from previous potlucks. "Different reality systems have different laws of physics. The pocket dimension hosting us must accommodate all simultaneously. Like running incompatible software on the same computer," Eloise mused. "Precisely," Paradox agreed. "And like incompatible software, sometimes things crash." Eloise was about to ask for clarification when a tall, elegant being with skin that resembled the night sky approached them. They were pushing what appeared to be a cocktail cart that contained bottles of liquids that occasionally defied gravity. New ownership," the stellar skin being observed in a voice that sounded like distant wind chimes. "How refreshing. I'm the celestial bartender. First drink is complimentary for new cosmic system administrators. What's your poison, dear?" Eloise hesitated. "She'll have a quantum uncertainty," Paradox interjected. "Easy on the probability waves." The bartender's eyes twinkled literally, as tiny supernovas seemed to explode in their irises. "Excellent choice. And for you too." "Memory wine for me," Neem said eagerly. "Vintage happiness, if you have it." "I exist in all states of inebriation simultaneously," Paradox declined politely. "A side effect of my condition." The bartender nodded sympathetically and began mixing Eloise's drink, which seemed to both exist and not exist in the glass at the same time. "While you're here," Eloise began cautiously, accepting the glass that felt strangely uncertain in her hand, "I was wondering if anyone might be interested in taking over universe ownership. I came into it accidentally," and the bartender's laughter sounded like stellar fusion. "Oh my dear, cosmic responsibilities aren't returnable items. They're more like tattoos on your very essence." "But there must be someone more qualified," Eloise pressed. "Qualification is rarely the issue in cosmic matters," the bartender replied, their star-filled eyes suddenly serious. "The universe chose you for reasons that typically become apparent with time. Now, do enjoy the festivities. The pocket dimension becomes rather temperamental if the joy levels drop too low." With that cryptic statement, they glided away to serve a being that appeared to be a sentient cloud of probability. "Helpful," Eloise muttered, taking a sip of her drink. It tasted simultaneously like the best thing she'd ever had and something she hadn't tried yet. With an aftertaste of déjà vu over the next hour, Eloise mingled with various cosmic caretakers, from the chronometric custodian who maintained the flow of time in 3 adjacent galaxies to the probability pruner who trimmed unlikely futures to prevent reality overflow. Each time she broached the subject of transferring universe ownership, she received similar responses, sympathetic but firm rejections of the very concept. "You can't simply transfer cosmic responsibility," explained a being composed of interlocking geometric shapes who maintained quantum coherence in a distant nebula. "The universe has imprinted on you, as you have on it. Think of it like quantum entanglement at a cosmic scale," suggested a trio of harmonically synchronized entities who collectively oversaw gravitational constants in their sector. "Your consciousness and the universe's fundamental operations are now correlated systems." By the time Eloise reached the food table, she was feeling distinctly discouraged. She absent-mindedly served herself small portions of various dishes, avoiding anything that appeared to be actively defying the laws of physics. "I wouldn't mix those if I were you," cautioned a small being with clock faces for eyes. "The chronological casserole and the entropy salad create temporal indigestion when consumed together." "Oh, thanks," Eloise replied, putting back the entropy salad and looking around for Paradox or Mneem. She spotted them near the far side of the room. Paradox appeared to be engaged in animated conversation with a being composed entirely of what looked like folded spacetime, while Mneem was eagerly absorbing memories from a group of archivists from various reality systems. As Eloise made her way toward her companions, she noticed something odd. The room seemed to be hiccuping. Brief moments where reality stuttered, like a video buffering. Most of the guests didn't seem to notice, but as a physicist, Eloise was particularly attuned to discontinuities in spacetime. She reached Paradox, who was now alone, their companion having apparently departed. "Something's wrong with this pocket dimension," Eloise whispered. Paradox nodded, their form briefly displaying all possible nodding motions simultaneously. "I've noticed. The dimensional stability is fluctuating. I suspect it has something to do with the potluck dishes." "The dishes?" "Different reality systems, different fundamental laws," Paradox explained. "Some combinations of cosmic principles can create reactions." Before Eloise could respond, a loud crackling sound filled the room, and a visible ripple passed through the space around them. Several guests looked up in alarm. "That's not supposed to happen," Paradox observed calmly. "We should find Mneem and consider leaving." They made their way toward the area where they'd last seen the memory construct, only to find Mneem engaged in what appeared to be an increasingly heated debate with another being who resembled a walking library, complete with book-shaped appendages. "Memories are constructed," Mneem was insisting, their crystalline structure flashing with emotion. "They may be based on events, but they are created by consciousness. Precisely why they cannot be considered homemade for potluck purposes," the library being retorted, pages ruffling indignantly. "They are merely recordings. That's like saying a painting isn't made just because the scene existed." Mneem countered. As they argued, Eloise noticed something alarming. The space around the two was beginning to warp visibly, as if their disagreement was physically affecting the fabric of the pocket dimension. "We need to stop this," Eloise whispered to Paradox. Their debate is destabilizing. Another violent ripple passed through the dimension, stronger than before. Glasses shattered, dishes overturned, and several beings phased briefly out of sync with the surrounding reality. The mathematical being who had greeted them earlier materialized in the center of the room, equation swirling in obvious distress. Attention, caretakers! We are experiencing a dimensional incompatibility cascade. Please remain calm and prepare for emergency evacuation protocols. Panic immediately erupted, with various beings rushing toward the exit portals that had appeared around the perimeter of the room. Eloise noticed with alarm that the portals themselves were fluctuating, some closing prematurely while others expanded dangerously. Paradox, we need to. Eloise turned, only to discover that both Paradox and Neem had vanished. A faint outline of what appeared to be a kitchen door shimmered where they had been standing moments before. Another violent shudder ran through the dimension. The beautiful astronomical ceiling began to fracture, revealing unsettling glimpses of what appeared to be the raw stuff of reality, mathematical constants and physical laws in their naked form. What's happening? Eloise demanded, grabbing the arm of the mathematical being as they drifted past. Incompatible cosmic dishes, they explained hurriedly. The combination has created a recursive causality field that's destabilizing the pocket dimension. If it collapses, everyone here will be stranded in the interdimensional void. How do we stop it? The field must be normalized by the administrator of the dominant reality system present, the being replied, parts of their equation body beginning to fade. That would be you, universe owner. Me. Eloise gasped. But I don't know how to access your connection to your universe. Use it to stabilize the dimensional parameters. With that, the mathematical being dissolved entirely into abstract symbols that quickly faded away. Eloise stood in the increasingly chaotic room, watching as reality itself began to unravel around her. Beings were phasing in and out of existence, dishes were evolving into strange new forms, and the walls between dimensions were becoming alarmingly thin. A stray thought struck her. Paradox and Neem had vanished near what appeared to be a kitchen door. If the problem was with the dishes, perhaps the source of the destabilization was in the kitchen. Fighting against the buckling floor beneath her feet, Eloise made her way toward the shimmering outline of the door. As she got closer, she realized it wasn't entirely there. It existed in a strange state of quantum uncertainty, both present and not present simultaneously. Of course, she muttered. Paradox being near a causality field would create exactly this kind of uncertainty. Drawing on her physics training, Eloise focused on the door, mentally collapsing its wave function by the simple act of decisive observation. The door solidified, and she pushed it open. Inside was chaos of a different sort. The kitchen existed in what appeared to be a temporal loop. Paradox and Neem were there, along with the library being, all frozen in various stages of their argument. As Eloise watched, they moved through the same 3 seconds of conversation, reset, and began again. Cookware flew around them in predictable patterns, also caught in the loop. Memories are constructed, Neem would say. Cannot be homemade, the library would respond. Like saying a painting, Neem would counter, then reset. Eloise realized with horror that the temporal loop was feeding energy into the dimensional destabilization. Each cycle amplified the incompatibility of the dishes in the main room, like a feedback loop growing exponentially more dangerous. She needed to break the loop, but how? Time manipulation was well beyond her understanding of physics. Then she remembered what the mathematical being had said, access your connection to your universe. Though she'd been reluctantly handling cosmic crises, Eloise had been avoiding fully embracing her connection to the universe. It felt too intimate, too permanent. She'd been treating the universe like a borrowed car, handling it carefully but always with the intention of returning it. But now, with thousands of cosmic caretakers at risk and her friends trapped in a temporal loop, she had no choice. Closing her eyes, Eloise reached out with her consciousness, not to the universe at large, but to this specific pocket of reality. She felt it immediately, the fraying connections, the incompatible physical laws straining against each other. The dishes from different reality systems were interacting like volatile chemicals, creating reaction after reaction, and at the center, like a whirlpool growing stronger, was the temporal loop in the kitchen, feeding energy into the cascade. Without fully understanding how, Eloise mentally reached toward the loop, feeling for its edges, its rhythm. She sensed Paradox's multidimensional nature straining against the temporal constraints, Neem's crystalline memory structure absorbing and reflecting the repeated moment, amplifying it. The loop existed because neither would concede the philosophical point about the nature of memories. The argument had created a perfect circle of causality with no resolution. Eloise reached out with her mind and did something that felt instinctively right. She introduced a third perspective. Her own. Memories exist in a superposition of states she projected into the loop. They are both recorded and created simultaneously, existing in the space between objective event and subjective experience. The loop stuttered. They are homemade in the sense that consciousness constructs them, she continued, but not created ex nihilo, as they require external input. Another stutter. Thus, the question itself creates a false dichotomy that the universe does not recognize. The loop broke. Paradox, Neem, and the library being all stumbled as time resumed its normal flow. They looked around in confusion, then at Eloise standing in the doorway. "The potluck!" Eloise exclaimed. "The dishes are creating a dimensional catastrophe." Without waiting for them to process this, she rushed back into the main room, which had deteriorated alarmingly in the brief time she'd been in the kitchen. Reality itself seemed to be coming apart at the seams, with guests phasing in and out of existence and the cosmic ceiling threatening to collapse entirely. Eloise closed her eyes again, focusing on her connection to the universe. This time, instead of just observing the problem, she actively engaged with it. She sensed each dish on the table, identifying which combinations were creating the dangerous reactions. It was like a vast, multidimensional chemistry experiment gone wrong. The entropy salad was accelerating the decay of the chronological casserole, which was affecting the temporal consistency of the quantum uncertainty pudding, which was destabilizing the probability waves in the conceptual cocktails. Eloise mentally mapped the reactions, then began counterbalancing them. Using her universe ownership as a conduit, she adjusted the local physical laws, creating barriers between incompatible dishes, neutralizing volatile reactions, and gradually stabilizing the pocket dimension. It was exhausting work, requiring concentration beyond anything she'd ever attempted, but slowly, the violent ripples subsided. The walls of reality solidified, the ceiling repaired itself, and the guests who hadn't managed to evacuate began to phase back into full existence. When Eloise finally opened her eyes, she found herself the center of attention. Dozens of cosmic caretakers were staring at her with expressions ranging from awe to suspicion. The celestial bartender floated forward, their stellar eyes twinkling with respect. That, they said in their wind chime voice, was impressive dimension work for a new owner. "I didn't have a choice," Eloise replied, suddenly feeling exhausted. Everyone was in danger. "Precisely," said the bartender with a knowing smile. "That's how it always begins, not with wanting power, but with feeling responsibility. You may have come to this potluck hoping to give away your universe, but your actions have just demonstrated why you were chosen for it." Before Eloise could argue, Paradox and Neem emerged from the kitchen, followed by the library being, who was looking somewhat chagrined. "Eloise!" Neem exclaimed, their crystalline structure glittering with excitement. "You broke the causality loop. And stabilized the dimension." "Yes, well," Eloise said, "I couldn't very well leave you two arguing for eternity while reality collapsed around us." Paradox studied her with an uncharacteristically steady gaze. "You accessed your connection to the universe. Fully. It wasn't a question." "I didn't have a choice," Eloise repeated, though she knew it wasn't entirely true. She could have fled through one of the evacuation portals. But the thought of abandoning Paradox and Neem, along with countless other beings, had never really crossed her mind. The mathematical being who had advised her earlier reconstituted themselves beside the group. "The potluck will need to conclude early this year," they announced. "While the immediate danger has passed, the dimensional fabric remains delicate. Please collect your dishes carefully and proceed to the evacuation portals in an orderly fashion." Eloise made her way to the potluck table to retrieve her macaroni and cheese, which had somehow remained perfectly intact despite the chaos. As she picked up the casserole dish, she noticed something strange etched into its bottom, a symbol that resembled an infinity sign with a question mark woven through it. She frowned, running her finger over the mark. It hadn't been there when she brought the dish. "Ready to leave?" Paradox appeared beside her, their form now stabilized into their elderly appearance. "Did you see this?" Eloise asked, showing them the symbol. Paradox glanced at it, their eyes briefly flickering with what might have been recognition, but they merely shrugged. Dimensional incidents often leave strange traces. "It's probably nothing." Eloise wasn't convinced, but the mathematical being was now ushering them toward an evacuation portal, insisting that the dimension needed rest and recovery. As they stepped through the portal and back into Eloise's living room, she found herself surprisingly reluctant to let go of the connection she'd established with the universe. It had felt right. Natural. As if she'd finally found a tool she'd been meant to use all along. "I believe," Neem said thoughtfully as they materialized in the apartment, "that this was what humans call a bonding experience." Paradox scoffed, but there was less bite to it than usual. Nearly dying in a collapsing pocket dimension because you couldn't agree on the metaphysical nature of memories. Is that what passes for bonding among humans? Actually, Eloise said, setting down her casserole dish and looking at her strange companions with new appreciation, I think Neem might be right. Nothing brings people together quite like solving a crisis. People, Paradox repeated, raising an eyebrow. An interesting choice of words for our little group. Eloise smiled slightly. Well, what would you prefer? Entities? Beings? Cosmic catastrophe magnets? Friends might suffice, Neem suggested softly, their surface briefly displaying warm images of companionship from across time and space. There was a moment of silence as the word hung in the air. Perhaps, Paradox conceded finally, their form briefly cycling through several expressions at once before settling on what might have been a smile. Though if friendship involves more potlucks, I may need to reconsider my position. Eloise laughed, feeling lighter than she had in weeks despite her exhaustion. She still wanted to find the Chronoflux Emporium and return the universe, but for the first time, the task felt less urgent. She'd connected with the universe tonight, really connected, and it hadn't been entirely terrible. In fact, as she glanced at her toaster, which gave her a small ding of approval, and her coffee maker, which had already begun brewing a fresh pot as if sensing her need, she had to admit there were certain perks to the job. The symbol on the bottom of her casserole dish briefly flashed in her mind, that strange infinity sign with a question mark. Something about it seemed important, but like many things in her new life, its significance would have to wait for another day. For now, she had coffee to drink, friends to talk with, and a universe that, perhaps, wasn't such a burden after all. Later that night, after Paradox had phased elsewhere and Neem had entered their rest state in the corner of her living room, where they resembled a crystalline sculpture rather than a humanoid figure, Eloise sat on her balcony, nursing her third cup of coffee and gazing up at the stars. For the first time, she found herself looking at them not just as a physicist, seeing fusion reactions, spectral classifications, and orbital mechanics, but as an owner might look at their property. Not with a sense of possession exactly, but with a sense of connection and responsibility. I never asked for this, she murmured to the night sky. A shooting star streaked across her field of vision, as if in response. Eloise smiled wryly. I suppose no one asks for the responsibilities that end up defining them. She thought about the cosmic caretakers she'd met at the potluck. Each had their own domain, their own concerns, the probability pruner ensuring reality didn't become oversaturated with unlikely outcomes, the chronometric custodian maintaining temporal flow in their assigned galaxies. None of them had wanted to take on her entire universe. And perhaps that was understandable. After all, each had their own purpose already. What, then, was hers? Eloise traced the strange symbol from her casserole dish in the condensation on her coffee mug. An infinity symbol with a question mark through it. What did it mean? Was it a message? A warning? Or simply, as Paradox had suggested, a strange artifact of a dimensional disturbance? Her thoughts were interrupted by the softing of her toaster from inside the apartment. Dr. Pendergast, the toaster called, its voice prim and mechanical. You have been contemplating existential matters for precisely 47 minutes. Studies suggest this is the optimal time to shift to a more concrete activity to prevent recursive thought patterns. Eloise rolled her eyes but couldn't help smiling. Is that your professional opinion as a toaster? As a toaster with access to your neurological patterns via our shared connection to the universe, yes, it replied smugly. May I suggest organizing your thoughts on tonight's events? Perhaps a list of questions raised and lessons learned. Since when did you become my research assistant? Eloise asked, though she was already reaching for the notepad she kept on the small balcony table. Since you repaired a recursive causality field and prevented a dimensional collapse, the toaster responded. Your connection to the universe has strengthened, as has your connection to its constituent parts, including, I might add, its more sophisticated appliances. Eloise laughed softly. Fine, fine. A list it is. She began writing, starting with the strange symbol and working her way through the events of the evening, the incompatible dishes, the temporal loop, her unexpected resolution of both crises. As she wrote, she found herself feeling more settled, more at ease with her role than she had been since accidentally purchasing the universe. Perhaps it was the exhaustion speaking, or maybe it was the lingering effect of having fully accessed her connection to the universe, but Eloise found herself wondering if finding the Chronoflux Emporium to return her purchase was really what she should be focusing on. After all, none of the cosmic caretakers she'd met tonight had seemed to think it was possible. What if they were right? What if the universe had, as the celestial bartender had put it, chosen her for reasons that would become apparent with time? Eloise circled the infinity question mark symbol she'd drawn at the top of her page. Perhaps that was the real question here, not how to return the universe, but why she had ended up with it in the first place. Her coffee maker gurgled sympathetically from the kitchen. Yes, I know, Eloise called back to it. One existential crisis at a time. The coffee maker pinged in what sounded suspiciously like approval. Eloise yawned, suddenly feeling the full weight of the evening's events. She stood, stretching her arms above her head and taking one last look at the star-filled sky. I'm still not keeping you forever, she informed the universe at large. But I suppose I can take care of you for now. A warm breeze brushed against her face, carrying the scent of distant constellations and the faint echo of cosmic background radiation. It felt, improbably, like gratitude. Eloise smiled despite herself. You're welcome, she whispered, and headed inside to sleep. In the corner, Neem's crystalline form glittered slightly in the darkness, their surface briefly displaying a fragment of memory, the strange symbol from the casserole dish, glowing with faint light, before fading back into dormancy. Outside, the stars continued their ancient dance, now perhaps moving with slightly more harmony than before, guided by the hesitant but strengthening hand of their accidental owner.